Welcome to the HTMA Success Practitioner's Corner, a special series in which Susan Cachay highlights the incredible work being done by graduates of the HTMA Success Practitioner Training Program.
Welcome, everybody. We're here with another edition of the HTMA Success Practitioner's Corner, and I'm here with Amahl today, and it's so lovely to have you here. We've known each other for such a long time, and just always love speaking to you on the camera or off the camera.
Happy to see you too, Susan.
Thank you. So I just wanted to ask a few questions about HTMA and how that's informed your practice. And what I normally start out with is just by asking the practitioner, how has HTMA shaped your approach to wellness?
Well, it's transformed my life. May I mention a few personal things first?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I had a background with a BA in education and Spanish, and I did some graduate work in linguistics and journalism. But in my upbringing, I lived and traveled in more than 50 countries. I was teaching elementary school to college level as I got older, but in my travels with my family, I was sick often in India, Sri Lanka, the Yucatan. In my late 20s, when I worked as a model around the world, I did some testing on my own, and it appeared that I'd already been through typhoid and had some meningeal infection in the spine that at the time I had those were not properly taken care of. I had a residual exhaustion in my body all the time and a general malaise. So then I began to study gluten, iridology, herbs, and to get certifications to just do some health coaching with people while I was working as a model. Um, then I encountered three things that happened to me, three severe car crashes, and those impacted my body so severely that I ended up on hard drugs, allopathic drugs in the USA and going through multiple surgeries. The three car crashes covered a span of 33 years in my life. And after the first one, I reached out for HTMA through a client of mine who was talking about it. I was coaching her as a nutritionist, and my ears just pricked up. And I began to study, and I contacted a mentor that Susan and I both had, and he got me started as a patient in HTMA. And I noticed some really subtle dramatic results beginning to happen. So I became a provider. I did the certification, spent over a decade studying while still going through surgeries. I was in the OR more than 100 times. All the pain management drugs began to fail, so I ended up on morphine for 13 years. I lost everything. I didn't have family to rely on. I had a relationship that broke up. It was a big stressor on the relationship in New York. I was in California, where I'd been for the car crashes happened in the context of modeling and acting, and then, always doing coaching on the side. So after the aftermath, HTMA was there for me. And the long journey with conventional drugs and allopathic surgeries and multiple physical therapies really appeared to have produced some autoimmune symptoms that I'd never encountered before. So I had 6 autoimmune diagnoses. It seemed like my gut was destroyed. I had severe traumatic symptoms, malaise, exhaustion, and cravings, hair falling out, everything from Dupuytren's to Raynaud's phenomenon, freezing cold, RA, lupus diagnosis, relapsing polychondritis, all of these things. So I began to study, and I found that the basis of all interactions in the body were minerals. And that took me to the work of some of the people who are teaching a lot about this. And I began eating a mineral-rich diet and replacing every processed food with good options. I tried supplementing with zinc and copper and didn't really know what I was doing. I tried some testing, it began to become possible to get functional testing. So I tried like red blood count and magnesium and ferritin and all of those things, but none of those things made me feel like I knew what I was doing. Now, the things that I had that some of you may be going through were like weakened immunity and depression and bone pain and muscle cramps and dark circles and rashes all over my body and swollen and underactive thyroid. And these are all warning signs of mineral deficiencies.
Mhm.
So the blood tests weren't helping me very much. And I really doubled down on my HTMA program and the zinc balance, the magnesium balance, the manganese, the copper, the potassium, the selenium, the calcium, all of those things. And very subtly, I began to get better. Um, Part of this, as you know, is this even a nutrient-dense diet that we're eating these days has maybe 40% of the minerals that the same food had 100 years ago. And the medications had severe effects on my gut and my body. Um, my individual needs without testing were just kind of, random. And there was such a slow improvement in me, along with the PTs. I was still finishing scheduled surgeries. I'd gotten a sympathetic dystrophy in my nervous system where my limbs were curling because the trauma and assault on my body had been repetitive. So I was in a UCLA program with athletes and Gulf War soldiers who were assassins, and they would have repetitive injury like a rifle firing into their shoulder or an athlete off the starting block, the same kind of motion. And I got thrown in there with them because all of us were having these seizures in our limbs because our nervous system had lost their set point from repetitive trauma and injury. And they even at one point had talked about amputating my left arm. So I hope this isn't too much for you all, but I just wanted to say that made me realize that HTMA works. Having targeted supplementation based on hair samples that are truly regarded as a soft tissue biopsy by the American government, really balancing my mineral ratios, which support my thyroid, my adrenals, my blood sugar, my vitality, all of those things, and realizing that even my brain, which we all have, a biochemical miracle, we've got 2 billion reactions per second going on in the brain. The chemistry of the brain relies on one thing, enzymes. And what's the only thing that enzymes rely on? Minerals. They can't do their job without minerals. So anybody with symptoms who's not feeling well, certainly anyone with an autoimmune diagnosis, is missing key minerals like magnesium or zinc or selenium, and all the processes in the body get slowed down, the ATP and all the basics. So long story short, mineral imbalances lead to big effects. And the steps to take for me are to do a good hair tissue mineral analysis program. Even if you're doing other things, I still, in my work, I become a functional medicine practitioner. I'm a nutritional therapist. People often have a big story to tell when they're going through physical things and having nutritional problems. It's part of a bigger component. It brings out a lot of emotion in us. So keeping the structure of a good HTMA program with the mineral nutritional balancing and being legally trained and certified to hear their story and also maybe recommend some food testing or send a phlebotomist to get their thyroid test or other functional tests. It has made a wholeness to my teaching that doesn't happen when you don't have this solid baseline mineral reading of what's going on in the body. For me, HTMA is like the basement. I will take patients, clients who want to do, food testing and they want to do the gluten testing and all of that with me. That's great. Diet is key. But wow, the clients of mine that we do the HTMA like 3 times a year, they are the ones that make the most progress.
Yeah,
So I,
interesting. I know, I agree. It's like the foundation, right? So if you're
yeah,
missing that, it doesn't matter
yeah,
what else you do.
yeah,
It's not as effective. And sometimes when people do the program, the mineral nutritional balancing program based on HTMA, sometimes they don't need anything else. But when
yeah,
they do, it makes everything else more effective because the body
exactly.
is sort of be in better balance initially. So what do you think if someone, well, I am asking you, but if I were to say, well, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned in applying HTMA in your practice?
Go slow. Less is more. A lot of supplements aren't necessary. It's like weeding the garden.
Yeah.
Stick with the most important mineral ratios, like, that blood sugar ratio with the calcium, magnesium.
Yeah.
Uh, Addressing that sometime. It can be from heavy metal overstimulation, but often a client who comes to me at the beginning, their body just can't handle their carbohydrates. And that's based on that hair tissue reading and helping the client to key their diet carefully into that, then thyroid and adrenals, those ratios, because the minerals relate to each other. It's like a domino effect. Um, I think trauma patterns. My own body had so much trauma. I did talk psychotherapy, I did polyvagal theory, I did psychodynamic. Still, there was trauma in my cells. And the test shows that, the hair test, in the
Mhm.
mineral pattern. And working for me, mine was one of the longer patterns I've ever seen that was
I
stuck in this
know. Yeah.
trauma pattern. It took years for me. But
Mhm.
finally, somehow, filling in those deficiencies and holes in the system, my body then had a stability to release even more of what didn't come out through talk therapy.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen any other program that will help as much with and that's trauma that goes way back. The cells don't differentiate whether you were screamed at or whether you got hit by a car. The cell just registers trauma, trauma, trauma. And that in my personal life and in some of my clients has been amazing. I have maybe 30% of people in the film business. I'm in the LA area. Through the car crashes, I ended up here and pretty much losing my life in New York. And there are also people with severe deficiencies just because they are rigidly disciplined, either on too much athletics, not eating enough, rigid body standards, and the softening in them that happens when they're getting at least what they need at a basic level is amazing. And I'm not against being vegetarian, but there also are many deficiencies that arise if you do that in an uneducated way.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but these are some of the thoughts that come to
Yeah.
me.
Yes, and you did absolutely. And it's one of the things that you mentioned, I think, is so key too about the stored trauma in our cells and how this is really the only program, nutrition program, mineral program that I know of that actually the way that we balance the body and the body starts to release toxic metals and replace them with preferred minerals, right? A concept of ionic mimicry that along with those toxic metals we store toxic emotions and all sorts of stuff and those start to be released. And I agree with you, talk therapy can be really helpful. I have a background in psychology counseling, but this sometimes gets at things in a deeper level in a different way.
Sometimes it's freaky.
I know, I
It's
know.
just
That's
freaky.
fascinating. Yeah.
Like suddenly you're remembering stuff from years ago, and the body just seems to be, as psychiatry uses the term catharsis, but we
Yeah.
have this thing called retracing that goes on. That when
Yeah.
the body's supported enough, then it goes back and picks up cold infections and old emotional injuries. All of that's the same in the cell. And so when the body goes forward with that, you have what we practitioners call healing reactions or retracing. And I've learned to just flow with that all because my body's finally like coming up to speed. Now, I did want to quickly mention there's major patterns on a test when we get it as practitioners. And one of the major patterns that helped me a lot too is called the sympathetic dominance pattern. Because at a cellular level, my sodium and potassium were so low from all the drugs and all the stress and all earlier infectious disease and other things in my body that I was exhausted and no conventional medicine tests were picking it up. And
Yes.
when we saw how low my cellular sodium and potassium were, don't be confused with blood levels. You know, some of my clients try to get a blood test and that's not what we're talking about.
No, exactly.
But my body was actually robbing all of the potassium and sodium it could get its hands on just to keep a level in the blood.
Mhm.
And my exhaustion level, people would sometimes say, yeah, you've been through so much more than any person you could even imagine. However, maybe a little bit's in your head. And it's like, well, of course, some of it is because I'm a 3D being, you know, but literally in my body, there's an exhaustion that made me have to go to bed by 1 or 2 o'clock in the day for years once I got out of a wheelchair and done with a cane and a walker and all of that. And when the other minerals in the body begin to build, then often the sodium potassium ratio, which is thyroid and adrenals, will begin to rebuild. And that whole HPA axis that is so popular in the talk
Yeah.
today begins to mend.
Yeah.
And that alone took a few years for me to get out of that sympathetic dominant pattern.
Yes. And it
And
also does. And I think that people think that it should happen sooner than it does.
yeah,
So
yeah,
many layers to it. And usually it goes back quite far in a person's
yeah,
life. Yeah. And the body has to be able to also trust that it's safe, right? So there's
yeah.
that safety piece in there too. Yeah.
Exactly. So, you know, all of us in the teaching the program have these major patterns to look at on a test. And I always am looking for their vitality, their blood sugar. Are they in sympathetic dominance? What's the trauma pattern? I mean, there's these really big things that no other form of medicine addresses. And even functional. I'm so grateful for some of the functional practitioners I work with. But some of them still will use an old conventional medicine model where they're prescribing this herb, this supplement, all these things. And it's still a mass application. And even though I teach a protocol, I'm not for, there's no possibility of one size fits all.
No, no.
So looking at for me, HTMA is like the basement. You want to build a body, your foundation is HTMA.
Yeah.
And for those of you watching this that don't understand, it's just 3 times a year. 4 is maybe ideal, but 3 times a year, you take a small sample of hair and you submit it through a kit that I send you. And there's just one lab in the USA that does that properly, Analytical Research Lab in Arizona. It takes a few weeks. They send all the results back to me. And Susan and I, gratefully, Susan and I had the same mentor, but I'm using her for mentorship now because 2 heads is always better than one. And we make up a beautiful program for you to stick with for like 3 to 4 months. And it have all your supplements, lifestyle recommendations, so many amazing materials and things. And that ideally is done, you know, 3 times a year. Even the government recognizes it, and they won't let me comment on your test if it goes past 5 or 6 months. But the program is something I'm going to be on for life, and I encourage people to do the same. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, I get that question too about, you know, how long do I need to be on this? And everybody's a little bit different, but there's a certain period of time people need for healing, a few years usually, but it also is the best prevention program. And the longer people stay on it, the deeper the healing is, right? Get into the deeper layers. What advice would you give practitioners who are just getting started in HTMA? And you know, we have our calls where there's a lot of us on the group calls in the HTMA Success program. And so, what advice would you have for practitioners that are just starting to get into this work?
Well, Susan and I had a mentor, and he was not big on group meetings or following up with support. He was brilliant. He's great, wonderful, thankful for him. But um, Susan started, for example, a drop-in for practitioners and a monthly meeting to go over case studies. So I'm going a little ahead of myself. Let's go back a little bit. Number one, know your material. I've probably read the big 700-page blue book 3 times.
Yeah.
And I go through all the articles.
Yeah.
Every client of mine is an amazing opportunity for me to relearn because nobody's the same. And so study, 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 do it yourself, do your own program. Try to do as many of the lifestyle recommendations as you can without getting manic or panicky. I don't want people to be so rigid that they're almost trying to force a healing process. I would say start slow. Know that even when you feel like you don't know very much, you already know a lot compared to the client who's coming to you. Be kind. I have never experienced so much anxiety in clients as I do these days. I
Yeah.
think kindness, boundaries. When you first go through a healing reaction or you're detoxing your copper and you get a rash over your liver, like I had a little carpet-like rash over my whole liver. I think a lot of it was all the drugs I was dumping too. I was so eager to do the program so quick and do everything. I didn't start slow enough. And I had very emotional reactions because it was freaking me out what my body was doing to heal itself in the very beginning of the program. So I think be kind and patient with clients. Be strict about boundaries. You're not their mommy, you're not their daddy, you're not the ER. I've gotten so much stricter about boundaries. And encourage your client that if they do this program, they are going to make progress.
Mhm.
There's almost no way that I know of that they won't go forward on their healing journey. So sometime with 1,000 holistic medicine things being offered on the market, it's hard to know if this is just another popular program. And I think a practitioner over time needs to have some conviction about this works and this is really what I want to do. And if not, maybe after a few years, go find something else. Because, and I think I would tell a practitioner that's going to be a heck of a lot of work.
Right.
So much detail. I put in so much time and energy for each client. It's way beyond the hour or 2 or 3 that you spend together with them. So
Exactly. And you know what? It's interesting because it comes to mind that there's some other programs out there that, hey, this is easy and this is, learn this in a weekend or learn this in a couple months. And I keep emphasizing where, I don't want to make this more complicated than it is, but there's a lot to this. It's not just kind of looking at the surface. And as you mentioned, you've read Dr. Wilson's big blue book, the number time, and every time I read it, I too still, I'm like, oh yeah, I get something else out of it. And it's not it really is something where it takes time to learn it. It takes time to do this well. And I think that it's important to have a mentor or a support community, which is what I'm trying to create with HTMA Success. And you're just kind of hitting home on that fact where this is an amazing program. And I don't think there are, that many practitioners that really do it extremely well, which is again why I created HTMA Success. So I want every person that graduates from that program to really be confident in knowing their skills and understanding this, because I think it's such important work.
Well,
So,
and you know, as I'm getting older, some of my clients have been with me when I was even bedridden and working. I've had clients with me who've been
wow.
with me for 30 years. And
Yeah.
the area, for example, of bone density and bone loss and that calcium magnesium ratio, it took me a long time to understand how the toxic metals in the body sometimes will bully those enzyme binding sites, and the body can't recognize the difference between a toxic metal and a healthy form of calcium. And
Yeah.
so sometimes all the calcium gets pushed to other places in the body, coronary calcium, bursitis, other places, because the body's being bullied by toxic metals. And on the program, when your mineral ratios are balanced and you're eating a good whole food diet and doing some of the lifestyle modalities, you know, we encourage things like walking or skin brushing or perhaps a castor oil pack. I mean, those are not hardcore requirements, but there's a lot of things to gently do in your everyday. One of my mentors always says, "Base hits win the ball game." You know, it's those step by step by step things. Then your body begins to release toxic metals in a way that it doesn't when you try to drag them out through chelation. I
Mhm.
probably spent 100 grand on chelation in the 80s,
Yeah.
and it wrecked my body further.
Yeah.
But what did I know, you know? And so to restore the proper mineral ratios in the body, which support every single function in your body, the body then often begins to push out toxic copper and toxic arsenic and lead and mercury. And that is a good component of this program as well, the release of toxic metals in a way that the body can handle.
And
It'll
that
work.
it's safe, and that's and doing so because the body is then replacing them. Like, I think that there's this
Yeah,
misconception where when people think of heavy metal cleanses or heavy metal toxicity, that it's just being idly stored in the body, where really, as you're talking about, they're being used right at the
yeah.
sites where the preferred minerals should be. So it's a longer term program because that's what's happening over and over, that release and then that replacement. But yes, very good points. Very good points for new practitioners. Amahl, thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to have your contact information below this video. So if anybody's interested in getting in touch with Amahl or working with her, I can vouch for her. She's an amazing practitioner, and her website's there, and we'll have it down below. Anybody who's interested in HTMA and mineral nutritional balancing practitioner training, the contact information for HTMA
Susan,
and for me will be down there as well. So everybody enjoy your day, and thank you so much, Amahl.
thank you. It's so good to see you. I could talk a lot more. So thank you. Bye.